Hello and welcome to Real Men Feel. I am your host, author, coach, and healer, Andy Grant. Please visit theandygrant.com to learn more about me. Real Men Feel reminds men that they are human beings and have the right to experience and express all of their emotions. We have conversations that most men aren't having, but that all men can benefit from. You know, some common complaints I hear from men over the years are that they feel disposable, under attack, can't do anything right, and don't know what's expected of them. So maybe it's time we get a woman's perspective on what's going on between men and women. My guest today is Reverend Leslie Peters RN. She is a curator of intuitive and transformational conversations, a trauma-informed and spiritual nurse leader, speaker, consultant, trainer, and retreat facilitator. She's worked with women for 30 years and told me guys can't win. Her mission is to teach the masses using the knowing of the heart, the knowledge of science, and the wisdom of experience. Welcome to Real Men Feel, Reverend Leslie.
Well, hello. I love this. I think this is going to be really good. Yeah, you know what, Andy, it's such a pleasure to meet you. And yeah, I'm going to let you, because I don't want to exert my masculine energy and take control of the conversation. I asked a lot of questions, so are you cool if I say, well, what about you?
Again, this is a conversation. So, yeah, and the first time you reached out to me and said, you know, based on your entire career working with women, that I wouldn't want to be a man in a relationship. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. So can tell me what you mean by that.
So and you know, you hit me on, there's women who are confident in who they are and who know who they are. That's not the case. But when a woman either, I guess, comes to a relationship with, you know, some issues that haven't been resolved. Same thing with a guy, right? But I don't know men that well. I know women. That's what I'm speaking. You guys may do the same thing on that side. But women who aren't real confident in themselves, I think that's where guys run into real trouble. Because with any relationship, two people, right? When you meet people, you each have needs, and a relationship starts, it's because something in you meets my need and something in me meets the need of yours. And, you know, I think as the relationship goes, if we don't become what we need, like if from the other person, say I need to learn how to unconditionally love you and I in a relationship. If we're in a relationship for 4 or 5 years and I haven't learned how to unconditionally love, and what's attracted me to you is you can unconditionally love, right? If I haven't learned that, it's been my experience that it's that thing which drew me to you, which will pull us apart. Because if I still have that unmet need, what I originally was attracted to in you, the unconditional love, is now getting rid of the crap out of me. Oh, are we allowed to first?
Sure. It's encouraged.
Like that. Okay. Does that make sense? So like a woman who knows and can meet her own needs, emotional needs, will be a lot. The men have a shot, right? And vice versa. I'm not saying it's just a woman thing. Same thing. If a man comes and, you know, if a man comes to a relationship knowing how to meet his own emotional needs, then the woman will be fine. If he doesn't, then she's going to experience the same thing he does.
And you had made a good point earlier. I want to kind of back up, and we're speaking in generalities, but yeah, as we say, women and men do this. We aren't speaking for all. We're saying the ones that are having the difficulties in life, and perhaps the unawakened masses, or I don't know, but just realize if doesn't resonate with you, you're not one of the people having the issue.
It's not. I'm just talking in general because I can't talk specifics out. Yeah. But what sparked me to reach out to you was I've never had a problem with women who were. I dealt with women in trauma, so they were pretty open and pretty authentic. They may not have been able to meet their own needs, but they knew they couldn't meet their own needs, right? Emotional needs. And I've had no problems with women who are very successful and who know who they are, and they're full standing in the truth of who they are. Where I run into a lot of problem in the last 5 or 6 years is women who pretend to know who they are, but down deep, they don't. And in that case, anything, I think, along the masculine line for anyone who's really confident and can stand in their truth is a threat. Make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And this is true for men and women, that any time that if I don't love myself enough and I want you to give me all the love to fill up my emptiness, problems.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, the crazy thing is, because I used to hear women say, like, oh, well, he doesn't do this for me, he must not love me, or talking about like abandonment, betrayal, lack of trust. And the reality is, if you're coming to a relationship looking for that in a person, you're going to attract someone who can't do it for themselves. So it really has nothing to do with how much he loves you. It's if somebody can't give that to themselves, there's no way in hell they're going to be able to give it to you. Right. And that goes men or women,
So is that the root issue and challenges between men and women, trying to use another person to fill our unmet needs?
Yeah, I think as much as we go back to Freud, I really do think it's the daddy mommy issue. I think if women, men are, if you look at it, in my opinion, they are a woman's first, hopefully, non-sexual, intimate relationship with a man. So the pressure is on guys, right? Because you are setting an example for that girl, what her relationships are going to look like the rest of her life, the interaction you have with her. And conversely with women, you know what I mean? I realized one time, and I'm saying all this, like, I didn't do great in my relationships just because I was married for 25 years, but the guy I married was just like my dad. It took me 25 years to realize how I'm like, oh, damn, I married my father. Like, what the heck? But they weren't confident in themselves, and the way that they made themselves feel better was to verbally make someone else feel bad. You know what I mean? So I kind of just shut down emotionally, and well, it's not about me, but my marriage, probably like 10 years into it, I remember my ex traveled all the time. And I said to him, like, if you want this marriage to last, you're going to have to stop traveling 6 days a week. And he never even looked for a job. So like 2 months went by. I'm like, do you mind me asking why you never even put a resume together? He goes, I can't answer that for you. And I'm like, I'm done. And then it became a transactional relationship for me. I looked at the finances of it. And I thought, I see the guy 1 day a week. I can stay and have like, so my relationship wasn't the best, but in hindsight, I see a lot of things that in my case would have made it better in the beginning. And it all comes down, I hate that word, communication. It all comes down to having the hard conversations before you get married.
Yeah, I've talked to lots of women that said if their dad was emotionally shut down, not expressing love and affection, perhaps the man not knowing how to react around his little princess as she becomes 13 and 16 years old and is blossoming into womanhood. And then they, again, look for that or expect all men, if a man doesn't show me affection, that means he loves me because that's what my dad did.
Yeah. And we judge people, or, we say to people, well, I don't know, we kind of are really hard on people about their childhood. But the reality is that from childhood, we all did what we had to do to stay safe, whether it was emotionally, physically, or both. And so these coping mechanisms, they're not character flaws. They're just coping mechanisms that usually work in childhood that don't work so well the rest of your life. I used to do a lot of talks for like addiction and codependency. And it's CODA, which is codependent. I'd say, I'm going to tell you right off, I totally do not buy into these are your character defects. Like, because if you do walk out of childhood with any mommy, daddy issues, like you judge yourself for that. Like, but relationships, and we were saying, my comment on saying that about women do, like the guys can't win, is because when I did work with women with trauma, even though they were open, they were looking at their partners, I believe, as men who would keep them safe. like your dad should have, you know? And I think everything goes back to safety and trust. It really does.
Is it possible to be an adult these days and not have experienced some level of trauma as a child?
I don't think so. I don't think so, because you know what? As a trauma expert, like I call myself a trauma queen, right? Like, and at a very early age, I was just, long story, but I found out now I did near-death experiences too, and I'm sure that's where it came from, because I was able to look at people and go, you know, when I was 4 or 5, going, "Oh, I really hurt. I know it's not about me. It was just an experience. Why are they hurting? They really need to be loved even more." But you can do that and come from a healthy place. The key with childhood, I think, is not getting people to change beliefs, but go back and change the perception of the experience that created the belief. In my opinion, beliefs are too hard to change. I mean, you would judge yourself like crazy trying to, you know, and some of them are actually true. Like, what were your beliefs from growing up? Do you remember? And do you want to share? You don't have to.
No, one of my strongest beliefs growing up was that life sucks, then you die.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I didn't. Yeah, my issues. I didn't talk to anybody, but I at age 5 I began getting molested by a male neighbor. So I also learned at a young age can't trust men. Even as a male, I couldn't trust men.
I know, and I kind of learned, and it's funny because I had to readdress it, even though, you know, in my childhood, I checked out of it. I mean, up until about 4 or 5 years ago, I don't remember. There was really not much I remember. My gut would tell me little things, and I just said, nah, don't need to know that, you know. But out in the world, I was totally different, which was really confusing. Opened my heart up, totally vulnerable, totally authentic. But I always saw in my life how my life out in the world was so much different than my life at home. It just felt different. And the key was authenticity, and I felt safe with myself. Because when I was out in the world and I was totally vulnerable, took the armor off, I could see myself. And so I could trust myself and feel safe with me. At home, and I like kind of dimmed my light, I hid the part of me that out in the world I could trust, you know. But when I was little too, like my sexual abuse started around 2. And I think right before it started, I was in a car accident and undiagnosed traumatic brain injury. It was like 1964, you know. But right after that, when I remember the first time my dad kissed me, it was during a diaper change. And this is how crazy it is, during like a baby diaper change. And I remember him going down and kissing me. It wasn't the kind of kiss, you know, usually as a child. And in my writings to myself, which is how I uncovered everything, I went like, my little girl was saying, "You just ruined everything. What did you do? You just ruined everything." But somehow from that point though, I wasn't angry. I really was never angry at anyone who abused me. I was angry at me for hiding me and abandoning myself, you know. And so whenever women would say to me, talk about like people abandon them, I'm like, maybe we should look in the mirror, make sure we see ourselves first, because what I found for me, it was abandonment, betrayal, any issue I had, it came from the army, and pretty much telling myself, you're not worthy of being seen. I mean, that's what we do when we hide ourselves, right? And I think I strayed from the question, but it's about safety and learning how to feel safe with yourself.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. One of the things though that might really help people, I still do it every day, throughout the day, is I remember as a little kid, putting my hand on my heart, and I did something called rubber band breathing, which I would imagine there was a rubber band inside me, and I would breathe in from my feet, breathe up to my head, holding my belly in, and then I would send the breath all the way down to my feet, and I would just do that. I've since learned it's like a Reiki master thing. But as I was breathing that way, I'd put my hand on my heart and close my eyes and just go, I'm safe, the world and stuff in place. I'm safe, the world around and stuff in place. I did that anytime. I told 5 women about sexual abuse and they didn't do anything. I would go, and those people in charge that really, because it just reminds you that you're safe with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, because it really is up to us to decide. We decide if we're safe or not.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
look, the reality is, I was sexually abused, I was like emotionally neglected, verbal, all that stuff, And my experiences weren't much different than other people. What was different, and I'm pretty sure it's as a result of that near-death experience, I walked away being able to go, that's just an experience. It means nothing about who I am. And at a very early age, being to go, oh, wow, I wonder why what I'm saying is making them so uncomfortable that they can't address anything, you know.
What's your experience with women saying they want men to be sensitive and then their man
And
gets
that,
sensitive?
yeah, I've had that, women, yeah, they want their men to be emotionally available, but then as a man appears quote unquote weak, they're like, what's the matter with him? I don't want someone like that. Well, make up your mind. What do you want? Right. And I think, again, it all goes down to childhood because somehow a man's, if his father was never emotionally available, then they're going to expect if a partner is, that there's something wrong with that. And I think the whole issue with childhood is just for those of us who experience some kind of trauma. I don't know about you, but that's all is normal. Like, people didn't come over to my house. There was only one girlfriend I went over to her house. Like, you kind of stay within your own bubble. And when you're in that bubble, you know nothing else but what's in that bubble. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's getting, and here's another thing. If a woman can't be emotionally sensitive with herself, that makes someone else, whether it be a man or anyone else, that makes them really uncomfortable because again, it's facing her like,
Yeah. It's almost like asking for something that you're not healed enough yet to fully receive.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like that mirror thing, right? Like everyone, if something really pisses me off about someone else, well, I gotta take a good look because that's what I don't like about myself.
Right.
And the thing, I think guys have just gotten it's really hard for you all because we may treat each other the same, but society gives women permission to talk about it. Where, thanks to you and people like Henry, right? Like you guys are getting it out there. And I think once men are within themselves, through what society says, you guys get together, then it's time to get women and men together. And, what I would love to see is like in groups, just a man getting from a woman, he doesn't know what he needs, and a woman from a man. For example, if a woman needs to feel safe from a man and she never felt safe from her father, have a man give her a hug with nothing, just a safety hug. What I mean? Like there's nothing coming from it, but just a hug where someone can be held in a space where there's nothing expected of them.
So then is the solution that a man or woman should not be seeking a partner unless they know that they both parties have done the inner work?
Yeah, but that's not reality, right?
Right. So what do we do?
The solution is before we enter into long relationships, somebody's got to be vulnerable to start the conversation of questions like, so in a relationship, like, what do you need to feel loved, to know that I love you? What is it you need? There's no wrong or right answer. But then, I'm going to say, like, now if I had to do it again, I would do like almost a contract, like a prenuptial, not with the money, but a prenup, right? But as soon as that word is even, people are like, oh, you don't love me. Oh, come on, the reality, right? Like if you're, that's what I'm saying, to detach any emotion from the questions that need to be asked, realizing that, if you are with a man or a woman, they want you to sign prenuptial. Prenuptial is just protecting your assets. That's a wise move. I think, though, the question you ask is to start asking the questions. Have a list of questions, because if you're asking someone honestly and they can't answer honestly and get offended, you don't want to be with them.
Yeah. So it sounds like if you don't have some self-awareness to begin with, you shouldn't be attempting to get involved with people.
I know. With that, yeah. And have it be a happy ending. Yeah. It's just assuming, women assuming that men know what they need. Assuming never is a good thing on any. But a woman, and if let's say a guy does get emotionally sensitive, available, and she gets upset, well, then instead of assuming things, the guy has to say, why don't you question, like, what bothered? What was it? What did it make you feel that, because otherwise he's just going to walk away and he's going to guess what's in her head and heart and him. One of the things guys do, and both girls, I learned relationships that I would never do now, is start any sentence with you. This made me feel, because no one can argue with your feelings. But you to me just all of a sudden, and I did that all the time. It puts someone on the defense immediately.
So over the years, I've heard many men say that women expect us to be mind readers. Mm-hmm. and then that we can't believe what they say.
Yes.
And it sounds like you're almost like agree with that. Yeah. So do women say the same thing about men, or is this kind of a one-sided perspective?
Here's the thing. Women don't really, unless I probe, which I always ask questions, if they feel safe enough to answer. I've never heard women talk about stuff like that. It's the women that, for example, my kids are in school, right? Like in Southfield, that kind of thing. It was bitching and complaining about not just men, but it wasn't really getting to the root of the problem. And I think it was because it's so hard for women to share. I think that's a key thing. If women of a certain, if they can't share amongst themselves, then that's kind of the work I want to be doing too, is to get women in touch with themselves. And because it's not fair to anyone else. Like, I don't know about you, but I can deal with anything, but I need to know what I'm dealing with. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I've always said to my kids, just tell me the truth, because I can deal with whatever it is you tell me. But if I have to guess what's going on in your head, we're doing.
Yeah, it's one thing to be resilient, but it's harder to be resilient with unknown everything coming at you. Yeah. What am I reacting?
If women are just kind of like ranting and they're not even being rational, 9 out of 10 times, just give them a hug. No words. And I think that's where, and it's no fault of men. It was with society. A lot of times when a woman bitches or complains, she doesn't really want you to fix the problem. She just wants you to hold a space and say, it's okay.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure
that's
right?
definitely challenging for many guys.
She feels alone. Like, I don't yell much, even with my kids, like I never, but there were times when I would lose it. My son would say to me, it's like, you just like, yeah, I don't even know what the hell you're talking. I said, you know what? Give me a hug. Because in those moments when I'm irrational, it's not your mom you're dealing with. It's something that 5-year-old is still dealing with. And I'm feeling scared and I'm feeling alone. Just hug me. Know where it's necessary. So I had men friends try it and they were like, I know, it still hit me if I go to hug her. I'm like, don't say any words. Just hold her.
Right.
And
men think anyone speaks to them to get them to take an action to fix something. And they're like, oh, you're just sharing to get it out of you. You just want to be heard. And when I was, depressed and suicidal, I thought if anyone knew my real thoughts and feelings, they would run away. I would be alone. So I think that's
Yeah.
kind of what it is for everyone. I'm
Well,
curious.
and check this out. So my whole life outside in the world, like I always was vulnerable and I didn't complain about things, but I was not afraid to share my inner darkest secrets if it was relevant in the conversation. So the past like 4 years probably, I uncovered all the issues with the traumatic brain injury and all this stuff because using a computer for the first time, like I had figured out ways to work with my brain on a pen and paper world, but with computer, it's hard to avoid. So I talked to women about this and I would be vulnerable and they would immediately shut down and not say a damn word. So for 4 years, I'm like, oh, this is even worse. Tell me I'm an idiot, tell me whatever. But that not acknowledging. And I knew it made them uncomfortable because what are they going to do? They don't know how to help me, right? And so before the last few years, I never saw a downside to vulnerability. And, but you would think as women, we'd be nurturers. But that ain't the case.
Are there any tips you can share to improve? So we've saying like we need to communicate better, need to everyone to be willing to be more vulnerable, to be heard, to feel safe,
Yeah.
and how does someone start that with a potential partner? Like, do you really just go, "Hi, nice to meet you. Here's my deepest darkest secret," or can I tell you these horrible things?
I I would, maybe not on first date, but second, third, whatever. Like whenever things start getting emotionally intimate, I would just ask, like, what are your previous relationships? Like, why did they end? If you ended them, what was it? Like, just ask. Like, we don't have any to ask. And to be honest with you, I've asked really bizarre questions to people that most people would say would cross boundaries, but most people have always answered them. Given that it's coming from a loving place, not like you're trying to get something or achieve from something. So yeah, I would just ask, what do you like in a relationship? What would be your perfect relationship? Ask a woman, what's your perfect guy? What do you can't stand in a guy? Like, I think if a man ever asked me that on, even the first, I'd be like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. Because that just tells me as a woman that like, this is going to be very cool to communicate. And if a woman shies away from that and shuts down and won't answer, walk away. It ain't going to get better,
Yeah, that's part of it too. Like, yeah,
without addressing it,
yeah, the quicker we're willing to have the hard conversations, the less time we waste. Well,
yeah.
let's find out now, as opposed to years from now, that we're, trying to fill each other's unmet needs and the needs that we don't even realize are unmet and can't even name, and we're just these traumatic beings bumping into different walls all the time.
I know, and it happens a lot too. I hear from women like I learn now in my life just from listening to other women's stories. Like if a relationship starts off, it's like you're everything about somebody's life, and whether it's run or walk away slowly and look as the objective. Because when it starts that heated, there's usually something on both parties deeper.
Yeah.
That
I always say that when you don't need a relationship, that's when you're ready for one.
yeah, exactly. And well, what about so I'd say for men, actionable things, ask questions, set a time, like in a relationship, if you live with someone, set a time once a week or at the end of each day, 15 minutes, kind of like have a heart talk, like Vegas. She gets to say something, she gets 10 minutes, you can't interrupt, and what she says doesn't leave that conversation, like no repercussions. And same thing, just to get comfortable with the uncomfortableness of conversation, of vulnerable conversation.
Awesome.
Yeah. I'll tell you one that I never understood that goes back to trust is I used to date a guy who was in a band, right? And they were on tour all the time. One woman got upset once because she found out a guy, her husband had a woman. And the guy was saying, so well, that happens all the time. It's like an unwritten law. I said, well, does anyone tell the women, like when they're getting married? Because if a guy says, like, look, I'm going to cheat on the road, it means nothing. It's just part of the thing. Leave it up to her to go, can I deal with this or can I not? But the worst thing is not knowing.
Right.
Yeah. And, but yeah. Another thing is look at your partner as a 5-year-old in those moments when you go. Because that's how I look at most people, including myself sometimes as 5. You know, if my behavior is like a little, oh, okay, what's the 5-year-old need? Yeah.
Right. It really is that
Change.
inner child dysfunction showing up. And if you can own that in
Yeah.
the moment, recognize it, and not take it personally, not thinking it's your partner today, it really is an old wound showing up.
Yeah. One of the things that the women in trauma, right, the kids seem to be a big issue in that the women didn't think the guys were doing stuff as well as they were. And so, you know, the women would say to me, well, I keep telling him he's not doing it right. And he doesn't do it at all. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. If someone kept telling you you were screwing up at something, would you keep doing it? Like, you know, and both have to take ownership. Like either the woman says, if she just says, I can do it better, but can't give examples how she does it better, then that's just some ego thing. But if a woman is telling you this isn't good enough, or this isn't how I would do it, say to her, how would you do it? What would be your ideal? And then it's up to you to go, can I do that or not? Like, you know, but it's all about just asking. Because we're too complicated as beings to try to guess one another.
Yeah. If you feel like you're expected to read someone's mind, like stop trying and just ask.
Yeah.
Ask for
And that's why I
clarity.
said if you do that in the beginning of a relationship, and it's not the beginning of a relationship, certainly before you get married or live, you know, kids, how do you imagine yourself what kind of parent you want to be? It's, you know, it's really not rocket science. It's asking, but I think a lot of times we don't ask because we're afraid of the answers we're going to get.
So I know you weren't a typical RN. Can you tell me a little bit about your working
Sure.
the trenches, as you say?
In the trenches, yeah. So I worked for the first half of my career, first 15 years, I worked in a hospital, labor delivery, and trauma room. There were most of the people had adversity and trauma because the hospital was in an area that was low income. And then when I left there, I went to work in public health in one of the poorest zip codes of Philly. So I would go into the home for women. And, you know, because of the way I dealt with my own traumas when I was 16, I needed to feel connected to something, to somebody. And I was always kind of philosopher type, which doesn't go for real big in school. You know what I mean? Like I was likable, but I didn't have a lot of close friends. And in high school, at one point, I tried to change to be like everybody else. And that's kind of where I got seriously depressed and suicidal because when I tried to change, I lost me. I lost connection with who I was. And so when I was 16, I went, all right, life is either going to have to change or I'm going to end it right now because I don't want to feel this way. So I went out in the world and I knew I needed to be accepted for who I was. And I didn't know how to get that. So I went out and I just started driving around and looking at people and thinking, what do they have in common with me? What are their lives like? Whatever. Did that for a couple months. Did help me feel less alone. But then I would stop. I got curious about people. So I would stop people on the streets and say, hey, by the way, my name's Leslie, and I'm trying to struggle with this. What about you? Like, and people just the stories, and I boiled it down to like I was vulnerable first, you know, and that became where like that true connection between people. It's seriously intimate conversation in 10 minutes because you felt the heart of the and the world became my home, strangers and family. So I learned to look at people as I looked in their eyes, and the rest of you, I couldn't remember what you looked like because I was looking at you deeper than your surface. So when I went out to work in these areas, I think that proved to be a real benefit because I didn't walk in as some white woman who knew more than they did. I walked in as another woman who could learn something from them, and they could learn from me. And together, we can hopefully, I did high-risk OB, and, we could get them a good outcome. When I left work, there was a college in Philadelphia had been studying my patients, and they said, what did you do? You need to teach nurses because your patients have better life outcomes. And I'm like, I had no clue what I was doing because it was so simple. I was just being authentic. But that authenticity created a safe space for other people to see themselves. And once you can see yourself clearly, you can shift perception of anything.
So, Rev Leslie, what's the best way for people to learn more and connect with you?
I tell people the best way because they don't have a website or anything yet. They can reach out at calendly.com / Reverend Leslie, REVLESLIE, the number 4 part. And then they can set up a time to talk. And I'm not opposed to text me at 610-506-8298. Just tell me where you're texting from. People are like, you can't do that. And I'm like, no, I do because I trust my intuition, and I let my inner knowing decide when I'm safe and when I'm not.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's all good. And Rev Leslie, thanks for reaching out to me to begin with. Thanks for coming and sharing your perspective. And thanks everyone for tuning in and listening to us. Please visit realmenfeel.org. See the blog post for this episode. We'll have links to all the resources mentioned. Wherever you're discovering Real Men Feel, please subscribe, follow, do the thing you can do on the platform that you're on. And if you want to explore what life could really be like for you and figure out what you really want and what's in your way, book a clarity call with me. Visit theandygrant.com/talk. And until next time, be good to yourself.